Well, good morning. I am Illinois Senate Republican Deputy Leader Sue Resin. I represent the 38th Senate District. As a parent and as a legislator, I believe one thing is very clear. Our kids are growing up in a digital world that's moving faster than our laws have kept up with. And far too long, we've allowed that gap to exist. Through my Safe Screens, Healthy Minds initiative, I've been working to bring balance back to that equation. We all know that social media is having a real impact on our kids, from mental health challenges to exposure to harmful content. The evidence continues to grow. This is not a theoretical issue anymore. It's happening every day, and families are seeing it firsthand. And we have to act now before it becomes too late. One of the proposals I've introduced is Senate Bill 4046, or the Social Media Age Restriction Act. This bill would require platforms to take responsible steps to prevent children from creating or maintaining accounts, including the use of age restriction systems. Now, I understand that's not that everyone doesn't agree with this approach. So there are many who believe the better approach is not to ban access, but to fix the platforms themselves. And I completely understand and agree with that sentiment, which is why I also proposed another legislative proposal, Senate Bill 3454, or the Better Social Media Feeds Act, which brings transparency and accountability to the algorithms that decide what content users see. Right now, these platforms are designed to maximize engagement, even if the engagement harms the well-beings of the users. This bill requires platforms to be more open about their algorithms work and begins to shift the focus towards long-term user outcomes. Meanwhile, Senate Bill 3241, or the Age-Appropriate Design Code, requires companies to put the best interest of children first when they design their platforms. It strengthens privacy protections, sets safer default settings, and limits manipulative design practices that can negatively impact our children. These are thoughtful, targeted steps to improve on how social media works. But let's be honest. If these platforms are not willing to make meaningful changes, we can't simply stand by and do nothing. Everything has to be on the table when it comes to protecting our children. Because at the end of the day, this is about accountability and safety. It's about making sure that the digital world that our kids are growing up in is safer and healthier and built with them in mind. Thank you. Now I'd like to turn it over to Senator Erica Harris.
Thank you, Leader Resin. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here for discussing this important topic. I'm State Senator Erica Harris. I represent the 56th District in the Metro East. 3 years ago, when I first walked through the doors of the Capitol, I made a commitment to be a voice for families, to stand up for the safety and well-being of our children, especially in a world that is changing faster than any of us can keep up with. Since that day, one of my top priorities has been protecting kids online. Because let's be honest, the internet today is not the same place it was 10 years ago. It's more accessible and in many ways more dangerous for a young person. It's hard for parents to keep up, it's hard for them to protect their children, and they're increasingly up against a system that makes the job harder. That's why I've introduced Senate Bill 3945, the Adult Content Age Verification Act. It's a common sense, very straightforward piece of legislation. It just simply says that if a business is profiting from pornographic content, it needs to take reasonable steps to ensure that minors do not have access to this material. Right now, explicit websites can be entered by anyone with no real safeguards and, frankly, no real barriers. And the consequences of that are not hypothetical. Studies show that the average age of exposure to online pornography is just 12 years old. 12. That should concern all of us. We also know that exposure at a young age can be linked to negative emotional, psychological, and behavioral outcomes. Leading organizations like the American Academy of Pediatrics have been warning us about these risks for years. So the question becomes, what are we going to do about it? My bill requires very reasonable age verification, whether that's a government-issued ID or a secure, commercially viable method, to ensure that users are 18 years of age or older. It also gives the Attorney General the authority to enforce the law and provide businesses with a clear path into compliance. This legislative package that Leader Rezin and I have filed and continue to advocate for is a very good first step. More than half of the states in this country have already taken action on this issue, and others are continuing to come forward. At the end of the day, this is about responsibility and keeping our kids safe. If someone exposed a child to explicit material in person, there would be consequences for that. It's illegal. Online, we have allowed a system to exist where that kind of exposure can happen every single day with a very little to no accountability. Like every parent, we want our kids to grow up safe. We want them to have space to be curious, to explore, to learn, but we also want them to be protected from the things that they are not ready to see or process. This is about putting reasonable guardrails in place. And most importantly, it's about putting our kids first. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Harris. We'd be happy to take a few questions.
All right, you get it through by May 31st.
Well, we've already had a committee meeting dealing with AI and data privacy issues. It was officially the longest Senate committee in the history of the Senate. We heard from sponsors of over 50 bills. I think that there is a willingness this year. The governor has taken up this topic as well, which I appreciate. I do believe that the bills that we see, even though we feel that our bills are strong enough to be standalone bills and can be passed by themselves, if they're part of a larger negotiated bill, we are fine with that as well. In fact, I just received the governor's bill that we're going through as we speak. So there's a willingness, there's a desire, there's a commitment by both parties, because it's incredibly important that we stand up and protect our minors and protect our children. This is not a partisan bill. This is a mom and dad bill.
One more from me. What personal stories do either of you have on this subject?
I have heard personally, and Senator Harris can tell you as well, I have heard from parents in my district. I actually did a tour of the state of Illinois, talking about my Safe Screens and Healthy Minds initiatives. I've had a package of bills protecting minors for the past 5 years, so I've been talking about this topic, but I've had many parents reach out to me and tell me about the horror stories of their children. They tell me the horror stories of how they thought their children were safe at night, but yet they're upstairs in their bedroom and they're seeing content that they did not ask to see, very nefarious, hurtful, harmful content that they should not be seeing. Kids are up in their rooms unbeknownst to their parents as well, being bullied and with terrible outcomes. I also hear from teachers. So when you're visiting school districts, the number one issue that teachers tell you is the huge increase in mental health problems and anxiety that students, that they have to deal with as teachers that they've never had to deal with before. That's coming from your social media platforms. So I am glad that finally we have the package of bills, and there are 50 bills. I will work at the table. Senator Harris will also work at the table to make sure that, first of all, that our bills are included, and secondly, that what we do and what we pass is right to protect the minors throughout the state of Illinois. And Senator Harris, I'll let you talk about your stories you've heard.
So we know that kids these days are spending more and more time online instead of in person, and with that additional time comes additional opportunities for them to be seeing this content. As Leader Rezin said, people in my district have said, as long as my kids are home, I assume they're safe. And there's a little bit of a fallacy with that thinking, because when they are online, we as parents aren't always seeing what exactly is happening.
Senator Harris, I remember the day that you filed your first version of this bill, we talked about, and viewers in my market said this bill should pass immediately. I remember that. Do you think that at this point, you noted multiple states have already addressed this, we see this talked about nationally, is 2026 the time that every state should have this? Should it be done federally or state by state in terms of the port and age verification?
Federally would be fantastic. Right now, we're seeing state by state. Thank you for taking such interest in this over the last few years. I know that we share the sentiment of what an important issue that it is. When I first filed this bill, there were some legal ramifications to that were playing out in other states. We've seen those go all the way up to high court, and that, like Texas, for example, just was deemed constitutional the way that they have theirs written. And so we were looking at what the language was in other states and seeing how those court cases were playing out, and feel like we have very good language for a bill that is absolutely constitutional and will protect the kids.
And I'd also like to add, and thank you, Senator Harris, I'd also like to add the reason that you're seeing the states take up all of these bills is because at the federal level, they are not and have not. And they've had an opportunity for the past decade or longer to address these issues, and it's very frustrating for us that they have not. So you're seeing in the state of Illinois, we have 50 bills. Many of the bills that we have proposed, you're seeing in other states as well. The states have taken the approach that if the federal government doesn't choose to protect our minors by passing substantive legislation, that we will take a state approach. And if we are challenged in the court of law, then so be it. We are challenged in the court of law, and that opinion will give us a pathway for what can be upheld constitutionally.
Senator Rezin, you talk about your algorithm bill. The House passed their own bill known as the Children's Social Media Safety Act. How is your bill different than the version that the House passed? And if that bill's called in the Senate, is it something that you would support?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the intimate details in the House, but if it's dealing with the algorithms that are written to addict minors to platforms, I support it. I'm all in. For me, I do not care who's the sponsor on the bill. I do care about passing legislation that's incredibly important in protecting our minors from these algorithms written. Currently, especially on the social media platforms, the algorithms are written to show content, to keep and to addict the minors to the platform. The problem with that is, first of all, the minors did not ask to see the content. Oftentimes, it turns out to be innocent originally, but then they're seeing nefarious content that they did not ask to see that brings them down a rabbit hole. But secondly, a minor's brain has not developed yet, meaning they cannot complex think through images and through data and stories that they're seeing about whether this is truthful or false or not. We as adults can complex think and know that for the most part, the content we're seeing is, we can complex think through it knowing that this is probably incorrect and I'm not going to pay attention to it. But when you have minors seeing content that's negative and harmful at a rate, which oftentimes they can see the same content at 200 times an hour or more, it is changing how your brain and your thought process works. It is harmful to the minors because it creates tremendous anxiety and mental health problems. And that's why we are on board. We will look at any bills that we see, whether they're from the House, the Senate, whether they're Republican or Democrat bills. The main issue is that we get something passed in a bipartisan manner that protects minors. And that's why I'm excited to stand before you today and be able to say after 5 years and after 3 years for Senator Harris, it's nice to see our bills receiving some airtime and being able to be heard during our committee meetings. Sure.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.